Serena, thank you so much for being here with us today. Welcome, everyone, to my expert interview series. Today, we are joined by the wonderful and charming Serena Holmes. And Serena, you wear so many hats in your life. You look so young and are so young, but you have been an entrepreneur, an author, you're a realtor, you're a mom, you're a wife. You've got so many different hats that you wear. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's wonderful to have you here. And with this expert interview series, we're diving more into the space of kind of entrepreneurship, but not as much from the tactical, but a lot more from the mindset. And I know you have been so courageous over the last couple of years, and you were focused heavily in real estate and particularly in private mortgages. Do you want to share with people a little bit about kind of what you've been through in the last couple of years, just as much as you're comfortable sharing? But
Yeah.
I know that you have been really generous about sharing your experiences and what you've learned in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll make sense just to go a little bit back before that, just so it makes sense even to how that came to be and why, I really dove in headfirst with it. I had my own business for 18 years called Tigress. And to your point, like I didn't actually start the business, but a lot of it came from survival skills. Like I was really scrappy, always had to kind of pave my own path and stuff like that. And this opportunity just happened where I became a brand ambassador part-time, led into management, partnership, and then 4 years, and the founder decided to leave for personal reasons. So we went through a buyout. I ran the company for 14 years after she left. And finally I was at the point where I thought, I'm investing in real estate, I'm educating myself. I was investing as a syndicated mortgage lender, was introduced to private in lending and investing. And the main purpose that drew me to that was the fact that I had this really busy, active business. But then I was at the point where like I wanted to start my family, wanted to take a step back, and I was worried about if the company would take a hit in my absence or anything like that. So I was trying to find other income streams to support myself when I took that step back from the company. And that my daughter was born in December of 2019. I thought everything's kind of set up in a certain way. I had the same, one of the employees I had with me for 6 years stepped into my mat leave coverage. We had a team of 10 full-time and 2,200 part-time working event to event across the country in the United States. And then she resigned when my daughter was 2 months old. And I was like, what the frig? And if I knew that she really wasn't committed earlier into my pregnancy or before I got pregnant, maybe I would have made some different decisions, right? And so I kind of panicked and I hired a mergers and acquisitions company to value the company. And we were kind of ready to try to market it. And then we went into the pandemic. So
Mm.
good luck selling an events company when you can't even go outside. Obviously, we weren't an essential service, so I just had to make some decisions really quickly because we had a few months of operating costs in the bank, and I was like, this will be gone in no time if we can't operate. So I
Yeah.
basically cut my entire team back just to one person who I held on to just so that when we were coming in and out of lockdown, I had support because my daughter was an infant. And I committed to getting my book published and got my residential real estate license, just thinking, I'm investing in real estate. Like, of course, I'll get my real estate license. Sort of
Yeah.
two very
This
different
makes
things.
sense as a
These
next
are
step. Yeah.
totally different things. And then, I just started dialing a little bit more into the private lending. And I was working at that point exclusively with a mortgage broker. And everything had been going so well. Like, I did 25 deals in 4 years. And I was like, well, I have access to more equity in my home. We're taught a lot about leveraging that equity at OPM, and it's kind of this perfect marriage, like the money partner and the active partners and stuff like that. And I thought, well, why don't I expand? Like I could be doing a lot more with what I have access to. And in fact, I was able to actually triple the income that I used to take from my business. So when the kind of time came, we were coming out of the pandemic. I would have actually kept my agency had that one employee I kept stayed with me. And she resigned in January of 2022. And I was like, well, my back's kind of against the wall. Like, I have no more head office team. I have no more like actual physical office anymore. Like, do I have it in me to
Yeah.
build it back up to where we were? Like having a 2-year-old at home. And at this point, I had tripled my income. So I was like, I don't need this anymore. I'll sell it myself. And I got a mutual release from the mergers and acquisitions company. And
Yeah.
I did what they should have been doing, which was calling all the agencies that knew who we were, could assimilate our business, saw value in our website, and I had it sold in 2 weeks
Good
after it
for
being
you.
like listed for sale for 2 years. And we closed on Valentine's Day 2 weeks later. So, I was at that point living the good life. Like I didn't really have to work as a residential realtor right away. I had the private lending money coming in. I was able to dedicate time towards my daughter and stuff like that. And everything was good until one day it wasn't. So, where I thought that this was stable, I'm like, I'm diversified. I have over 20 different deals with like 15 different companies. As it stands today, all of those have stopped making payments. Most of them were debt, not equity. So in a couple of instances where they're LPs, like it is again not considered an interest payment. So the category of that's a little different. But I mean, everything just blew up in a way that me and thousands of others in the same space are still trying to wrap our heads around. And I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of layers that we've peeled back, right? So in some instances, it's the market. Is it mismanagement? Is it fraud? Like it's different in every different situation, but it's just hit our community like a bomb. So
Yeah.
I've just been trying to push forward and work our way through it.
Yeah. And just for anybody who's watching or listening right now, to clarify, private lending has been one of the most stable strategies that have underpinned the Canadian real estate investor market. And in the last couple of years, based on my rough calculations, there is about $1 billion in funds that were lent that has now disappeared from the marketplace. So people like Serena have been significantly impacted because the money that, the cash that they had, their savings for their retirement, the equity in their homes has disappeared. But it's also had these kind of other ripple effects where people who are still trying to do deals and do projects in the future are struggling to find people with capital or people willing to take that risk. And
Yeah,
Serena, you did a lot of things right. You worked with a mortgage broker, someone who you should be able to trust, who would look at and vet deals properly. You
yeah,
diversified, you were in different projects, you had different borrowers, you had a ton of experience, like 25 deals in 4 years.
yeah,
The that for most people would meet the definition of experienced and knowing
yeah.
how to underwrite. And there must have been a time there. Have you been able to sort of pinpoint what you would have done differently had you known? And we know hindsight is 2020 and nobody would have signed up for this. It's a terrible position to be in. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if you have any insights you can share that might help people who are interested in the future.
Yeah, I mean, what's actually really frustrating is that, I didn't just go into this without any counsel. Like I did have a lawyer that I leaned on to look at my first few deals. And to the point now where I'm even like, should I file like an errors and omissions claim? Because I would have probably made different decisions had I gotten different advice. And I think looking back, I probably should have had a litigation lawyer actually look these over. But at that point, like I would not have known that. So it was kind of a real estate and corporate lawyer that looked things over. One, they didn't actually really warn me to do with anything unsecured and actually believed that I had some quasi security because all of the agreements were written in such a way that in the event of a default, I could put a lien on the property. I got their
Yeah.
ID. I was able to look up the properties, confirm that they owned it. Sometimes we looked at the LTVs because we were able to look at the debt on the property. And, what I learned later from one of the other mortgage brokerages that I work with, that never should have been written that way ever. So
Yeah.
just the fact that the agreements were written with that element in it, like it really should not have been written that way. So I believe that I did have a form of security, even if it wasn't registered on title in the form of like a mortgage in any way. So from the beginning, I had received that advice, and that was like probably the first 5 or 6 deals that I had. And then a lot of them were written the same way. So I would still look into the borrower, look into the property, and things like that. And as we know now, like as there's been bigger operators and bigger borrowers, like you could look them up all you want, but if it's unsecured, it's not registered anywhere. And some of the bigger issues that have occurred are that, one property might have upwards of 20 different promissory notes on it. So the debt on the property is triple the actual value of the property. So there's really nothing even left, right? So I mean, there's kind of like what I learned is bigger is really not better. So dealing with some of the larger operators have created like they're actually in the worst of the worst in all of this, where you've been kind of one to one, where maybe it's a borrower that has to pay off a line of credit for a few weeks before a mortgage closes or a couple months, or they need it for a business loan. Like that's a very different dynamic than working with an operator that's trying to scale to like 1,000 doors and $100 million or something like that. Like those are two very different scenarios. But I think everyone really believed like there's assets backing this up. And, there's just no way to really look under the hood when you are unsecured, right? So I think I never should have really considered anything unsecured, or maybe just give myself a shorter leash. Like in the beginning, it was like $100,000 was what I played with. And then I really expanded and diversified, just not really understanding the legal priorities effectively, understanding in the eyes of the law, it's like you don't exist. They do not care. They look at you like you're stupid. You never should have done this. There's just, it's been amazing to actually see the way that it's rolled out in the eyes of the court and with the lawyers and stuff like that, because it's literally like you don't exist. And I think if you were in the United States, this would be treated very, very differently, where there could even be jail time. But in Canada, there's just no political appetite to prosecute things like this. And, you know, maybe some people will get a slap on the wrist or a year if there was any fraudulent activity that was prosecuted.
Yeah. And it's funny because so many institutions in the real estate space, so many companies teach you, set up corporations to protect yourself from liability. But what they don't teach you is that when you lend money to a corporation, that the people who actually borrowed the money are pretty well insulated and there
Yeah,
really are virtually no consequences. They declare personal bankruptcy and virtually everything just disappears.
yeah, yeah. And that's actually one thing that we learned as well, is like one way to possibly look at things. Because it's really hard to trace these like numbered companies, and was money moved around, where assets move around. In a personal bankruptcy, they're just looking at the personal stuff, right? So one possible method of recovery is something called a Mariva injunction, and it's something that actually would freeze their assets globally and look at all of these corporations, and it would show if there is possibly any avenues for recovery if there was elements of fraud. So there are things that could possibly be considered. It's not an easy undertaking, but if there is the belief and some evidence that this has happened, that can be something that lenders can possibly explore. But again, it's all this costs a lot of money. Like I've spent about $40,000 on legal fees in the last year and a half, and all my income has effectively disappeared. So
Yeah.
that's been fun to navigate. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you have a lot of money to recover, then it might make sense to spend a couple thousand collectively with other lenders just to at least see if there is anything out there to come after.
Yeah, to explore options. And I think I love what you said about most people when they do private lending, a mortgage broker has a document, a couple of pages that, is this promissory note and everybody acts like it's, oh, well, we'll just, we'll save a couple $100 and we'll just all sign this document. And people don't even get independent legal advice or they don't know that they should.
Yeah,
And then that takes us into the space where there's now nobody who is in the know who has actually looked at this, vetted this, and then you throw in all the complexities with what's happened in the market in the last couple of years, and
yeah.
that just it's turned everything on its head. How do you how did you withstand that? Like I'm talking to people now, and there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of shame. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to show up the way that you have and to publicly talk about it.
Yeah,
And then there's a lot of regret, and those are really challenging emotions to move through to be able to leave that experience behind. How
yeah.
have you been able to navigate this space?
I mean, I'm not going to say it hasn't taken a toll, because it has. Like, this is just such a significant setback for my family, right? Like, I actually believed I was almost like I can work if I want to, like, I don't have to. And again, my focus was on my family. Like I wanted to have that time with my daughter. I was like, for the first time in my life, I'm kind of taking a step back from working actively so I can give her these experiences and stuff like that, right? But there are people that are at retirement age that they've lost their life savings. They're either losing or selling their homes. In one instance, three people have taken their lives. People are so devastated by all of this, and especially with the one mortgage brokerage, like I had 10 different deals across 8 different borrowers. Like nobody would have ever expected this magnitude across all of them. And what's actually even shocking is with the police, like they've said that they're finding it hard to make a case for fraud. I'm like, I would believe that if there's one or two borrowers here, but this is like 40 plus borrowers,
Mhm.
600 plus investors that have been impacted. How can you possibly say this is hard to make a case here?
Yeah,
And so
this is not accidental. This is not
it's not
unintentional.
accidental.
This isn't even negligent. This is
No, it's
absolutely.
absolutely fraudulent. And I think, for the one instance where some investors were wrapped up in the CCAA, like that's one instance because counsel was appointed, but then there's, 30 plus borrowers outside of that, and we're all just like left to trying to navigate this, right? And it's just been really crazy. And there are a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak, from, trying to seek legal recoveries and stuff like that. But I think for me, like I took a position on the unsecured lenders committee to try to navigate conversations between lenders, lawyers, borrowers, like just trying to get to best possible outcomes and stuff like that. And it absorbed like so much of my time last year because we were all just trying to grapple with everything and just try to find a way forward, right? And so it's a lot of sleepless nights. Like I think I'll fall asleep fine. It's not unusual. I'd wake up at midnight and be laying there for 2 hours. Just I think it's definitely taken a toll in different ways. And I mean, this is the kind of stuff that people like get divorced over, like, you know what I mean? Like it's just crazy.
Yep.
So I'm just grateful that my husband has active employment and we're just trying to work our way through it, right? Like it's just, we've got a little one at home and we're just trying to compartmentalize so that she's not affected by it. Like she's not aware of any of these things that are happening. But yeah, it's been really devastating. And I believe that from a legislative standpoint, we need to create more awareness. Like I even created a petition. I was like, let's create like a lot of awareness around this. Like there needs to be changes because what's happened is
Mhm.
not okay. We want to prevent these things from happening again. And yeah, it's just shocking because I wish that I paid more attention to things like Fortress or Epic Alliance when they went down because maybe it would have helped lend different perspective. Like I was aware of those things happening, but I didn't really understand what happened. And it feels like a lot of those situations are just, they're so similar. It's just different operators. So if I'd paid more
Yeah.
attention, I'm sure I'd be looking at things a lot. I would have looked at things a lot differently and made different decisions.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you're sort of navigating this by drawing purpose from it in terms of educating, supporting others, learning as much as you can from the experience, and making sure that you're sharing that to try and save other investors from feeling the same pain that you felt. And that's such a wonderful perspective to have because I think so many of us, when we encounter challenges like this, we go inwards and we end up stuck in this blame and guilt and all these other things, and it becomes really challenging to derive purpose from it, much less purpose where we're actually helping other people.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely been really common. Like, I've connected now with hundreds of other investors that have been impacted and probably on 20 different WhatsApp chats. Like, it's just crazy, but that's really the common thread. Like, they're just so ashamed. They're so guilty. Most of them don't have anyone to talk to about this. Nobody would understand. They don't want the criticism because they're already dealing with it, right? And I
Yep.
think that's what's unfortunate because that's where things like this history will be doomed to repeat itself if people don't shed light on what's happened and
Mhm.
shedding that awareness so that it can um, prevent these things. But I think to your point about other operators now that we're depending on these kinds of investors, like it's had that ripple effect where people that were doing good work are struggling now because everybody is so scared to invest or they maybe don't even have anything to invest with anymore.
Yeah, yeah, that money that would normally churn, every 6 to 12 months and would be available to redeploy,
Yeah.
that money is now gone.
Yeah.
So you have people who are fearful and you have money that's missing, and it's now created this like secondary wave in the ripple effect where people are
Yeah.
like, I might trust you and I might like you and I might believe in your project, but I just don't have anything to give you right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And that's
honestly,
been
like the way that I'm looking at it, like I said, bigger is not better. Like I don't think I would ever invest in anything again that I'm not like one-to-one on or just my own project. And it made sense at the time, like having my business, having my daughter, like there's a reason I wanted to be passive. And I mean, that was even my biggest attraction when I started to educate myself was like they talked about all these passive income opportunities. Like that was my biggest attraction in it. I was like, I don't have this desire to be a landlord. I don't want to be dealing with some of these things. But if I can put what little money I have to work and start to create these streams of income, that was really what I was most attracted to. And it's not like I had a lot to begin with. Like I'm talking about a few $100,000, right? Like it's
Mhm,
not like in the millions, but it was enough that it got me going. And really that was my main desire that I just wanted to have that time with my family.
mhm. Absolutely. And I think the really interesting thing is that, you with your experience and with the entrepreneurial mindset, recognizing where you are, and I think you've done a really good job of being able to face reality, of taking that deep breath and showing up with courage and saying, this is where I am right now. What do I need to do next to get out of it? And because I know a lot of people spend a lot of time
Yeah.
in that denial that, oh, maybe I'll get it back, or, if I just cross my fingers, or, it can't. And they spend so much time denying the reality of what's going on that the opportunity to be able to pivot and start to recover more quickly has actually passed them by.
Yeah.
So you've done a great job pivoting and leaning back in. And this is what I've been talking about for quite a while now with people when they're struggling with cash flow.
Yeah.
Investing in real estate isn't necessarily the way to go to generate cash flow. With what we pay for properties in Canada, there's not typically a ton of cash flow that we're going to generate from buying a piece of property.
Yeah.
And where you really get the cash flow is the active businesses associated with that. So you've
Hmm.
actually leaned in, you put your entrepreneur hat back on. One of
Yeah.
the things I admire a lot about you too is that you've been like, what do I need to do? And you show up and do it. There's, a lot of people, once you make some money, once you see a glimpse of success, once you see that financial freedom, there's an ego that comes with it, where it then becomes, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to
Yeah.
let the cleaning ladies go and clean my own toilets. I don't do that. And I say that as someone who very has in the past very reluctantly let my cleaning ladies go, because how do I sit here and do this now and then turn around and, go clean all the
Yeah.
bathrooms?
Yeah.
It's there's a tremendous amount of ego there, and you have to be able to let go of that ego in order to start that recovery process.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, I did end up selling my business, and a lot of that money obviously went into these investments. So
Mhm.
I didn't have any employment. And yes, as a residential realtor, but I didn't have any time to prospect because I was buried in calls with lawyers and lenders and borrowers and stuff. Like in some instances, like I could be on Zoom calls for 10 or 14 hours. Like I was like, had never worked so hard in my life for
Yeah,
nothing,
for
like throughout all
nothing.
of last year,
Yep.
right? So, I
Yep.
mean, I switched brokerages to another broker that had a different model just because they would be giving me the leads. But because of the way the market's been, like it's still been like really, really slow. I told you offline, like I was like, well, I'll just get a job then. Like I'll do what I have to do. And like based on my
Mhm.
skill set and my experience, I could probably make something that's in the, high six figures. And it was like crickets. And I was like, okay, now I'm unemployable. So, I kind of went back to that path of like, okay, well, what can I do or what can I monetize, right? So I started doing like brand collaborations. I landed like a keynote opportunity. I finally had a couple deals that came in, and then that's really kind of how the concept for Executive Lens came around because I was just looking at what am I good at, what do I like doing, and what will give me that shot at recovery because I do need to bring in some active income because all the passive income has obviously disappeared.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about this business that you're starting and what you're doing differently, because somebody else started your previous business, you worked there, then you purchased the business, which is super cool, and now you have the opportunity to actually found
Yeah.
a business. So talk to us a little bit about kind of that journey.
Yeah. Yeah. So my former business was specifically in events. So a lot of event staffing, event planning, experiential. It took many different forms depending on what the client wanted, whether they wanted to build like a 500-pound alarm clock and do a viral video with like 100 people dressed in their pajamas, doing a pillow fight. So we did really crazy things like that. But the staffing was probably the most challenging part of it because we were relying on a lot of other people to show up and do a good job for us. And that was the piece that I really was like happy to let go of. And I've been
Mm,
big. I've had the thousands of people working for us. I would prefer to be small. So ideally, I want this to be more of a boutique style agency. Social media is a big thing right now, but a big part of it is also personal branding. And from my background being in B2P, I really enjoyed working with business owners and entrepreneurs on the B2C space with residential real estate. It's just such a different dynamic, and I just haven't enjoyed it as much. So with the concept for Executive Lens, essentially it would be interviewing business owners, investors, entrepreneurs to capture 60 second to 90-second sound bites that would have a strong hook, a story, and a lesson. And ideally, it would be to build their personal brand on LinkedIn. So the commitment from them would be a 1 hour recording session once a month. We would record all the content. I would edit it back, give it to them, plug and play. So they'd get between 12 to 20 pieces of content that they could roll out throughout the month. But obviously, this would be consistent repeat business because you got to keep feeding the machine. But a lot of
yes.
times, business owners, first of all, don't know what to talk about. They don't know how to position it. They're not comfortable on camera. So, media coaching is a very big component of that, where it was different from a podcast because I'm not going to be in the finished product. It's not like there's a two-way dialogue. So you really have to frame the question in your answer in a certain way. So
Mhm.
oftentimes when I did the trial recordings, even, we had to go through things sometimes 5 or 6 times to get the soundbite the way that you know it's going to be effective when people are putting that content out there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, what is your story? Like, if someone talked to you about what your personal brand is now, because you've had so many different versions and you've
Yeah.
evolved and changed so much. So, what does your story sound like now? Because you're all about the stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I wrote my book, for example, I went to a writing retreat. And the woman that I was learning from is like, you can't have like a memoir and a business book. And I was like, well, you can't tell one half of the story without the other. Like it just doesn't have the
They go
impact.
together. Yeah.
And for my story, it's like when I was really, really young, my parents separated when I was just before I turned 5 years old. And then my brother went to go live with my dad and my stepmom, and he actually died in an accident at home just 6 weeks after moving in with them because he was left unsupervised. And he was one of those really like adventurous, rambunctious kind of kids. And essentially, he took out the riding lawnmower, and from what I know, like he turned the wrong way and went down the hill and broke his neck. And my dad found him, I don't know,
I'm
probably
so
5 hours
sorry.
later. So it was just devastating for my family in a way that, was a really defining moment. And, my mom really spiraled at that point in time and, went back and forth between my dad and my mom, and then later on aunt and uncle. And, just learned at a really early age that I had to provide for myself. And I had a roof over my head. It's not like I was going hungry, like I wasn't on the streets, but I knew financially, like I didn't have support. There's a lot of emotional dynamics that were wrapped up in that. And I was just really scrappy. And that's really how I landed in events. Like I was working at a gym and someone's like, you should work in promotions. And then, got into that, really enjoyed it. And then it led into the opportunities with Tigress. And I feel like now this whole situation that's happened in the private lending space, it's like I just feel like when it was good, I felt like I wanted to share it. I felt like I cracked the code. I was like, everybody should be doing like this is amazing.
Yeah.
Like it was, if it had been done properly, it could have been really amazing in the long term, right? But I feel like now that I've experienced these things, like I feel compelled to let people know how to do things properly. But I'm kind of at the point and in a certain season, like family and work-life balance is still really important. So I just want to be resourceful for people. I've always believed that we rise by helping others. So I just want to be that supportive resource for people in any way that I can be.
I think that's wonderful that you're still so committed to giving back, despite the fact that things have been pretty challenging for you in the community.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the only
Um,
way out is through, right? So,
that's so true, but it takes so much grit to get through. I think there's a lot of, it's very easy to fall into a mindset where we feel like life is happening to us. And the more challenges we see, the more adversity we feel, then the more we fall into the mindset that this is proof that we are that life is out of our control, that there's nothing we can do, that we are powerless in this world, and that all this stuff is just going to keep happening to us. I love how scrappy you are because you truly have a backstory where you have encountered tremendous diversity. And the interesting thing is, you have had moments where you have been so successful and you have achieved your dream and your vision, your goals so young. And then you've had that taken away from you. How do you continue to maintain that scrappiness? Like, what are
yeah.
you telling yourself? What are you reading? What are you doing that is enabling you to get out of bed in the morning and not just sit there and go, that's it. I'm staying here today. I'm pulling the covers up. I'm, I'm grabbing my coffee
Yeah.
and I am not adulting today. I'm staying home.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have those moments. Like, it doesn't mean that it's been a walk in the park. But again, because I do have my daughter, like, she's really a big focal point for me, right? Like, I don't want this to be something that defines us forever. And I feel like I owe it to her because I feel like this isn't even just my money and legacy. This is like what we would pass along to her at some point in time, right? So I think it's just, it's not going to help me get any further ahead if I was to just wallow in it. So, I do try to do as much as I can during the time frame when she's at school and just try to be realistic about what I can accomplish in a day. And I'm just, it feels like I've been floundering because like you said, like I have had some success. And even recently, like I caught up with some past clients and other people that you're so successful. And they just think because you have had success, you are successful. I'm like, I feel like I'm a
Yeah.
failure. Like I made some horrible decisions. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around all of that, right? I know it's not going to help me get any further ahead with my recovery if I sit there and just dwell on it, right? So I'm just trying to push past it. And I know that there are some people that are just in such a state of despair that they're finding it very difficult to pull themselves out of that hole, but it's just going to
Mhm.
dig you deeper if you don't find a way out.
Yeah. And I think at that point, it's critical that you reach out to people around you, people who you can have honest conversations with, people who you can talk to about
Yeah,
how you feel. I mean, I know that my husband and I had a financial setback in 2014, and we had a property manager who stole a considerable amount of money from us, and we made the just difficult decision to sell our house to make good
yeah,
on the money that she stole that was owed to um, uh, building owners that we were managing their properties for
yeah,
them.
yeah,
And it was absolutely humbling to go from someone who had a house and had a life and had a lifestyle, and to who was looked up to. At that point, I was already teaching for Rich Dad Canada, and you
yeah,
feel like you have this almost like this persona that you have to continue to have. And behind the scenes, you're making some very humbling decisions
yeah,
about okay, this is the money that we have, or this is what we have right now. Most
yeah,
people in real estate are asset rich and cash flow poor.
yeah,
So when you sell your house, or you sell things, then it's not like there's a tremendous amount of money coming in every month that's going to replenish things very quickly. You'd have to make
yeah,
other challenging decisions.
yeah,
So I think the opportunity to be humble, or the ability to be humble, and to be able to say, okay, I'm not buying this, or I'm putting a spending freeze on, or
yeah,
I'm going to carefully analyze where my money is going, what I'm spending my money on. If you play the cash flow game, one of the fastest ways to get out Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game is to cut back on your expenses.
yeah. Yeah, and that's what I did
So
last summer. Like when some of these loans had dried up. At that point in time, I still had maybe four or five that were doing okay. But I was still like, you know what, I'm going to do what I can do to just bring my expenses down as much as possible. Like I shifted my HELOC back into a mortgage because that knocked $1,200 a month off the monthly payment, and some's going to equity. And I know that's
mhm,
tax deductible, but it's still like you still have to pay that every month. And then I made some changes with some other things just to cut things back as much as possible, even with different subscriptions and stuff that I had. If you call them, sometimes they'll offer you stuff. Like I was going to cancel my heating and cooling plan. Because even when you're on the math, I'm like, when I look at what I've spent on this in the last like 15 years, like I could have bought like three furnaces, but they are willing to give you like 6 months for free so you don't cancel, right? So there's
yeah,
things that you can do. And if you just call up these different providers and stuff like that, right? So I'm glad that I did. I was able to bring my expenses down to a certain point, but then everyone else that was remaining just one by one, like dropped off. I'm like, well, I'm glad I at least cut back, right? But
yeah.
then I've had some of these other smaller opportunities just to do like collaborations and keynotes and things like that. And they've just at least helped me get by while things are turning around, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if there's other people out there who are in the same situation, and they would like to start a business, they want to start a side hustle to
Yeah.
increase their income.
Yeah.
What words of advice do you have for people who are trying to decide what to do? Like for you, and I say this because I was an event planner too before I got into real estate, and it's a very specific skill set.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of focus on attention to detail, on systems, on processes, on organization, on
Yeah.
replication. You can't forget things. You can't not pay attention to things. You can't have things that don't happen because somebody didn't show up. You always have to have plan A through Z.
Yeah.
So everybody's coming at businesses with a different skill set and a
Yeah.
different experience. So what advice would you have if someone said, I want to start a side hustle, but I don't know what to do? Do you have any
Yeah.
recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, when I got my residential real estate license, I don't think I thought it through the right way. Like I probably should have gotten my financial planning license, and I am registered to get that. So that will be something that I'll consider. It has passive income associated. It's not like people contact you in a frenzy to like do a showing on the weekend, when you're dealing with like an insurance or investment plan and stuff like that, right? So I think you just have to
Yeah,
ask yourself, like, what do you want? What kind of work-life balance do you want? What do you enjoy doing? The things that there's a lot of things in residential real estate that mimic what I didn't like about in events, right? Like I don't
Mm,
necessarily want to be doing the evenings and weekends. I
yep.
don't want, just so some of the dynamics that are associated with it. I want control over my time. I want the repeat business. Passive income would be great if I can find other ways to kind of make that happen. So I think you got to look at what you're good at, what your skill set is, what you really want out of life, and then just try to figure out the pieces. Like when I was starting Executive Lens, like, you want to find something that you can have the same name across all social media channels, your website, um, your email and stuff like that. I used a platform called HostSinger to actually make the website. There's a lot of templates where AI can design it for you at a pretty low cost. So I was able to
Hmm.
do that all myself without engaging a designer. I offered my services for free to do trial recordings so I can actually show people what is involved in the process and what the finished product is going to be. I have a lead magnet, I have a ClickFunnels, and now I'm at the point where I'm just going to start reaching out to people that I think would have a need for this service and also talk to people that are like the gatekeepers, like people that are coaches working with other business owners. They may have a good number of people that they're working with that would see value in something like this. But I think you
Yeah.
just have to look at, again, what you want out of life, see how competitive the marketplace is. Like it's not for everybody, right? And not everyone's cut out to be an entrepreneur. So if it isn't something that's going to work for you, then, there are other things that you can consider from an employment standpoint as well.
Yeah. I love that. What does success look like for you now? Has your vision of success changed at all? Has any of this experience changed what you dream about in the future for yourself and your family, or is it the same dream and this is just part of the journey to attain this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing was just having again that time with my daughter. And, there's a lot of things I would do differently. Like instead of maybe going all in the way that I did, and I'm still optimistic about some things coming back. But my main thing is like I wanted to just be able to have that time with my family. Like be at the cottage on the weekend, go away a couple times a year, be uninterrupted with her. Like it was really more about the time even than the money, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't need like some lavish lifestyle or anything like that. It was just being able to have the freedom and flexibility to be focused on them for the season that I'm in at the moment, right? So I think that's still very much the goal. My daughter is a little bit older now. She's 5.5, so it's not like not in daycare or like she's in school most of the time and stuff like that.
Yep.
But I mean, really, that's just I wanted to have that work-life balance. Like I get a lot of purpose and fulfillment out of working, and I do enjoy it, but I just want to be able to have the flexibility to be working on my own terms.
Yeah, I love that. And I think when we're employed and we're working for others, the focus is on freedom is defined by financial freedom and not depending on somebody else for a paycheck. But I
Yeah.
think as soon as we're in entrepreneurship, that vision switches to time freedom.
Yeah.
And then it's having the ability to be able to decide where our time and energy goes, how we spend each day. And it's funny because um, I had this vision for what time freedom looked like for me, and it was the opportunity to invest in my health and to, work out and do all these things all for my
Yeah.
health.
Yeah.
And what's happened right now is my in-laws are older and my we just moved my father-in-law into long-term care. He's had a very rough transition and I'm spending my days, driving to appointments and doing administrative things and filling out paperwork and all these kinds of things. And I suddenly realized it's only because I have the time freedom that I have the ability to be able to do that. I can't
Yeah.
imagine trying to do that for aging in-laws if you're still working for someone else.
Yeah. 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 Because
That
your
would
time is
be,
obviously not your own. So
yeah, that would be impossible. So I think it's really important too for people when they have this vision of, becoming an entrepreneur or starting a side hustle to make
yeah.
sure you really understand. And I love this actually ties back to the private lending is to understand where the risk comes in and where the reward comes in and make sure that you are signed, that you're talking to people who have been there and who have done that so that you
Yeah.
and you know what you're signing up for because we have a really bad habit as human beings of kind of romanticizing things. Like you and I were talking beforehand and I was saying, people everything is multifamily, multifamily, multifamily. And I've owned multifamily buildings for 20 years. They are not sexy. There are phone calls in the middle of the night. There
Yeah.
are tenants who pass away. There are units left behind that are destroyed. And you need to know what you're signing up for if that's the
Yeah.
investment model that you're going for. Like you need to do
Yeah.
your due diligence on everything before you move forward in any particular direction, I think,
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah. And I mean, absolutely. And I think I did always understand that there were risks involved. And I always kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
thought, well, like I feel like I ate my words. Like I remember doing a podcast, be like, I've got 18 different lens on the go. Like, what are the chances of them all going sideways? This is what happened. This is the chance.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I mean, it's just nobody expected on this scale to be
Yeah.
impacted, right? And I think that's what's been really hard to grapple with. There's another investor I connected with that we actually have almost an identical set of investments. Like we didn't know each other prior to this, but our
Yeah.
investments almost align completely. And we're just like, how? Like what
Yeah.
sorcery is this? So again, it's just trying to work our way through it. I'm grateful that I'm young enough that I think I can bounce back from
Recover.
this. But there are a lot of people that are much older, and I think this is going to be, you know, I don't know how they would come back from this at this point. So,
Yeah. Well, I so appreciate your honest share with us today, Serena. I know that this has not been an easy road for you. You and I kind of connected in person a couple of years ago, actually, at a crew meeting,
yep.
and I've sort of been watching your journey and admiring you and your resilience. I think that's literally, as human beings, one of the most fundamental skills that we can have is resilience. So
Yeah.
congratulations to you for continuing to show up and for keeping an eye on other people and continuing to share really honestly what you've been through in the hopes that you can prevent other people from ending up in the same situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. And we will share the information on your business, your contact information. So if you are looking for help telling your story as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, then by all means, reach out to Serena and her company. She will take excellent care of you and she will help you be able to share your story so that people understand who you are, what you're about, and want to work with you and your business as well. Thank you, Serena. It was such a pleasure to see you again.
Great. Thank you.